What is a 1 in 1 million thing that happened to you that no one believes, but you swear is true? I was dating a girl, and on our second date, she made me dinner at her apartment. Sometime during the evening, I walked around her place looking at the art she had on the wall. One print looked very familiar. She said she found it at a thrift store a few years back, and it was the first decoration she bought when she moved to this state. Then it hit me why it looked familiar. My grandmother had painted it. I'd been looking at the original my entire life. My grandmother was a prolific local artist, but it was the only painting she ever had made into a print. Anyway, we've been married 16 years now, and the original piece hangs in our house. Alright, that's kind of beautiful. Props to Grandma. Next story. I got my tiny drone caught in a tree once. It was stuck in the leaves. Really good. I was just getting ready to go home and find some long poles, but before I did, an owl swooped onto the tree branch, grabs my drone and drops it to the ground. It was still quite light outside, so it was surprising to see him. I've been friendly with this owl for the last year. He's really sweet. Loves to buzz my head during my night walks, land in the tree just outside of my arm's reach, and observe me. He's even popped up by my house while walking my dog, lands in the tree right beside where we were walking. I swear they recognize faces. He had a mate last year, and sadly I found her hit by a car shortly after. He was hooting in the forest for a long time. Very sad. Happily, he seems to have finally found another one. Who cares? I do, actually. That's really sweet. Next story. I was broke as a joke after a series of unfortunate events. My boyfriend and I managed to save up first and last month's rent just in time to not be homeless. We were on our way to give the cash and all our money in the world to our new landlord. A truck started aggressively tailgating us, honking at us and waving at us to pull over. We were on a lonesome country road. I pulled to the side to let him pass, and he kept pulling right alongside us. We were spooked, but he was persistent. When I finally fully stopped, he opened his truck door and waved my wallet with all our money at me. It had flown off the dash when I made a turn, and he picked it up and chased me down. It had no ID, just the cash. We would never have seen it again if he hadn't happened to be both behind us at the exact right time and a very good human. Okay, guys, I'm super stoked. I've been reading a lot of the sad Reddit story posts, and I'm just ecstatic. We're in a good mood, good vibe sort of situation. I'm loving every minute of it. So sorry for all the interjected dumb jokes and comments. I'm feeling good, I can't help it. But two, this also happened pretty recently to me. I was riding my motorcycle with shorts on, wallet fell right out of my pocket, and somebody chased me down and they were waving at me, but I had my helmet on and it plays music inside of it. So they're yelling, and I was like, oh yeah, what's up? Like I can't hear them. And then I sped off into the distance, and luckily this sweet lady somehow found my Facebook because of my ID, managed to contact me, and I was able to get over and retrieve my wallet. But you know, there's a lot of sweet people in there, and she didn't even take any of the cash. There's good people out there. You know, you just got to find them, or they got to find you. I don't know how you find them, actually, but I know they're there. Next story. I work construction, so oftentimes there is garbage blowing or strewn about. I was on a raised platform, supervising about 10 guys, and I noticed a lottery ticket on the ground. Didn't think anything of it, probably a losing ticket, and someone threw it away, right? The next day I was in the same area of the build, I noticed the ticket was still there. I picked it up and scanned it. Where I'm from, we have an app that we can check if your lottery ticket is a winner or not. $500. A $500 winner! I couldn't believe it! Next story. Years ago, I was working at a USPS distribution center, and a single piece of junk mail fell from a tray on the overhead conveyor system landing next to me. I picked it up to deal with it, and I was flabbergasted to see that it was addressed to my father. No one was around, and I seriously thought it was a joke. I put it back into the system, and it was delivered to our home a few days later. It had to literally be a 1 in a million chance. Next story. Took a PATH train to New York from Hoboken a long time ago when it was $1 fare, and the machine didn't accept change. The train arrived, and there was a guy in a panic because he only had change. I gave him a dollar bill, and he insisted I take his change, which I didn't want to do, and apologized that it was only 90 cents. I laughed, but he was sincerely apologetic. The train makes about 5 steps and ends at 33rd Street, New York City. I spent the whole day in New York and was traveling back to Hoboken from 33rd Road Street. At 14th Street Station, the door opens and a guy I didn't recognize gets on, heading back to Hoboken. He smiled and said, "I always pay my debts," and hands me a dime. It took me a split second to realize who he was, and we had a good laugh about it. Next story. Wife and I were going through our Pokemon cards one day and organizing them into a shared binder. She had so many more than me because most of mine were stolen from a bully of mine back in elementary school. When we were looking through them, I noticed on a few of the cards something I did when I was younger. I left little nail imprints on the corners of my cards so I'd know which ones were mine, and I used to play and trade. I asked my wife where she got those, because all of those nail-printed cards were the same that were stolen from me. She says, "Oh, some kid back in elementary school used to have a crush on me and gave me these cards." I asked what his name was. She says, Matt S., which is my effing elementary school bully. So wife and I went to completely different schools on opposite sides of the same town. She moved to Cali, came back to New York for a week to visit some parents, and 2 days before going back to Cali, we randomly met at a mutual friend's house in our mid-20s, hit it off, got married 2 years later, bought a house, decided to combine our cards to decorate the game room, and now I have all of my old Pokemon cards back. We were meant to be together. The wife and the cards. Next story. At a zoo as a teenager. Walked by an orangutan exhibit. It was open air, but there was a barrier. As I'm walking by, a rock hits the ground next to me. I look around and a gosh dang orangutan is laughing at me. I pick up the rock and toss it to him. He catches it deftly and tosses it back to me. This turned into a game of catch for a few minutes. No one believed me when I got home. Dad called me a liar and actually grounded me for making crap up. Flash forward a few years later, and we go to the zoo with my family. Guess who remembered me and wanted to play? Yes! Vindication! Next story. That I came face to face with the serial killer, Israel Keys. He tried to get in my house by pushing his way in. At the same time, I thought it was some college kid whacked out on shrooms or something. I lived in South Burlington, VT, and the next day, Bill and Lorraine Courier went missing. I actually have only told one other person about this. I had no idea they were connected until a few years later when I saw a show about him and I immediately recognized him. It was so chilling to see that same face again. I don't tell people because I don't think they would even believe me. Next story. In the early 90s, I was in Manhattan and taking one of those elevators that's glass and overlooks a large atrium. About 30 or so floors up, it stops and the power goes out, meaning the little phone/alarm doesn't even work. We are smashed in there, like, well, an elevator in Manhattan at rush hour. After half an hour, people really start getting uncomfortable. And after an hour, people start freaking out. No one is coming by, and no one is hearing us shout. Then, about 90 minutes in, 2 guys start walking in our direction, and we start pounding on the glass and yelling. They walk over, and when they do, I can see it's George Wendt and John Ratzenberger, Norm and Cliff of Cheers. At the time, the show had just had its series finale and was one of the most popular shows on Earth. They come over, pry the doors open just enough to talk to us, learn we're stuck and get help. When we get out, we learned they were staying in that building, there with the whole cast for some sort of press event related to the show ending. Minutes later, Ted Danson comes out of his room to join the fun. All 3 were so incredibly nice and took pics with everyone. Out of all the people in that city, we were saved because Cliff and Norm happened to be headed to their room and see us. Sometimes you want to go where everybody saves you from an elevator. You know, it wasn't as elegant as I thought. Next story. When I was 14, my next-door neighbor was 12. We had our first kiss behind our dad's car. Soon after, they moved away and our romance was done. Until 45 years later, when we reconnected on Facebook, I posted that I was going to Mexico, and she replied, "I want to go." 45 years between our first and second kiss. Now 51 years after our first kiss, we married on a beach in Cozumel, living our best life. The first person I kissed will be the last person I kiss. Next story. My car stalled out in the middle of a very busy road. So I was trying to push it into a gas station parking lot with the help of a good Samaritan. The car got going too fast. I fell and got dragged by my car for a few feet. Then, while laying in the middle of the road, I watched my car careen in the opposite direction of the gas station, pass right in front of my face, go through 5 lanes of traffic, and over a median. While my car was going over the median, the Good Samaritan ran through traffic, jumped into my car, and steered it safely into a parking lot. I jumped up and ran across the road to follow her. I had some bruises and road rash, but I didn't die, and she saved my car. I can't imagine that series of events is very common. Next story. I got something like 20th in the entire state on a statewide multiple-choice math test given to all 7th graders, where students were explicitly allowed to use a basic calculator. The 1 in 1 million part is that I left my calculator in my locker and my teacher wouldn't let me get it. I know. So I ran out of time and had to blindly guess on the last 5. Got 4 of them right by pure chance. I was a shy kid, but I absolutely reminded my teacher that she didn't let me go back to my locker for my calculator after my sweet results came back. Next story. Deep sigh. In 1965, at the age of 23, my beloved father, who just passed away last month at 83, came to this country from Eastern Europe to start his new life in the promised land of America, where he ultimately became very successful after toiling in the city for 60 years to provide for me, my siblings, and my beloved late mother. The only problem was he didn't speak English that well and was obviously concerned that it would hold him back in his new country. That same year, a brand new movie came out called The Sound of Music, which he was very interested in as it reminded him of the hills from the old country that he wouldn't see again until the wall fell in 1989. Determined to learn his newly adopted language, he walked into a seedy Times Square movie theater that year and watched that movie intently to learn the language. Not once, but 10 times that year. It's a memory he would never forget and occasionally bring up over the years. Flash forward 50 years and it's 2015, and it's the 50th anniversary of that movie's release. To commemorate it, the Academy had invited a very well-known Lady Gaga to come perform the famed title track during the Oscars, with beloved star of the film, Julie Andrews, there to witness it. The performance was otherworldly and completely out of character for Lady Gaga's nasally vocal range. It's like an alien took over her vocal tract and it sounds nothing like her. I mean, serious, Google it. Much like the way Bob Dylan threw his voice on Nashville Skyline. My father, now in his 70s, watched this famed performance in real time and was blown away. Just completely brought back to his youth as a young man facing down this crazy city, and Stephanie Germanotta was the one blowing his mind. He turned to me during the performance, nearly in tears, and asked me who she was. I let out a comic sigh and began to explain her history and cultural value. He then turned back to me and said, "She's so incredibly talented. If you ever meet her in the city, please let her know how proud I am of her. Will you?" I smirked to myself, laughed it off, and said, "Sure, Dad," knowing dang well that would never happen. Flash forward a few months later. I'm hanging out on the LES with my rocker friends in an underground bar downtown, all getting drunk, having a blast, when all of a sudden, I need an excuse to go hit the bathroom downstairs to take a leak. As I make my way down the stairs, I look up, and walking up the stairs is none other than Lady Gaga. Alone, just me and her on a narrow stairwell in a dirty bar in the city. I take a deep breath. Along with a big leap of faith, I open my lips and go, can I tell you something?" She turns to me, fully expecting me to burst into some "OMG, I'm like your biggest fan, oh my gosh" diatribe, when I turn and just go, "So, my old man asked me to tell you something." And as I explained the entire story above, fully expecting her to be completely apathetic to the admission, etc., I look up after the words leave my lips, only to find her eyes the size of the moon, completely swelled up with humility and compassion, nearly bursting into tears as she told me how much that story meant to her. "Can I tell you something now?" she said, as I braced for impact. I rehearsed that song for 8 straight weeks, for 8 hours a day leading up to that performance, knowing how important it was to an entire generation of people like your father. So please, tell him I said thank you, okay? I was completely blown away. I thanked her for her hard work on my father's behalf, hugged her, and sent her off as I drove home out to Long Island that night. The next morning, my dad walked into the kitchen and asked how my night went. I smirked, turned to him, and said, "Have a seat, Pops. Do I have a story for you, old man?" Rest in peace, Dad. I love you. Next story. My brother died in an accident. His fiancée was upset with my family during the funeral, and afterwards she never spoke to us again. Him and his fiancée had 2 dogs. After 3 months from his death, on a random Saturday, my girlfriend at the time and I went to a local dog shelter to see if we could maybe adopt a dog. I was really depressed and sad about his passing. It still felt very fresh. While I was walking through the shelter looking at these dogs, I saw a dog that looked familiar. One of my brother's dogs had a beautiful orange color coat and was long and thin like a greyhound. She may have been a mix. When I saw her name, I just about fainted. Her name was Impala. That's what he named her because his favorite car was a Chevy Impala. I immediately asked to speak to the person in charge of the shelter and explained the situation. I gave them the name of my brother's fiancée and asked if she had surrendered her. He explained that under normal circumstances they would never give out that information but would make an exception. He confirmed she had given her up for adoption and allowed us to adopt her. My girlfriend and I both cried all night with her, like I'm crying as I type this. She was a very loving dog and so special. She lived for 10 years, and every time I looked at her, she reminded me of my brother, and we loved her so much. It was extremely sad when she passed, and we miss her dearly. I hope my brother was looking down on me smiling, knowing that for whatever reason we decided to go to a random dog shelter on a random Saturday we found his dog. We never found out if his fiancée kept the other dog because he was not at that shelter, but this is my 1 in 1 million thing that happened to me. May they both be resting in peace. Next story. I had been asking for crows to befriend me for months while my husband was battling cancer. One day I came home to 3 waiting for me, and they were never there before. That was the last day my husband was coherent enough to talk to me, and he passed less than 48 hours after. I swear it was a sign. Next story. Maybe not exactly 1 in a million, but I find this little story experience super magical and rare for sure. Back in 2017, I took a 2-week trip to Iceland with my ex and some friends. We rented a truck and drove around the entire island, camping at various spots. It was in late August, by the way, so Iceland's summer with the sun being out till past midnight, very cool to witness. On one of the last big stretches of driving we had to do, we ended up getting a bad flat tire and had to pull over to the side of the local highway we were on, which had 2 huge grasslands on either side. It was the middle of the night, and actually dark out, and the closest roadside assistance was about 2 hours away, so needless to say, we had some time to kill. We decided to just hang out in the trunk of the car and drink some beers while we waited. Then my friend Luisa shouted, "Oh my gosh, guys, look," and pointed towards the field. Then seemingly out of nowhere, a huge herd of wild horses approached the wire fence out of the field where we were parked and seemingly came to check on us and hung out with us the whole time we waited for roadside assistance. But then it got even better. My other friend then shouted, "Whoa, look up, guys!" And we all somehow hadn't noticed that the aurora borealis was shining magically bright in the sky above us. None of us had ever seen it in person, and definitely weren't expecting to see it on the second to last night of our trip. It just all felt so magical, like we were supposed to get a flat tire that night. What started off as a major inconvenience ended up becoming one of our fondest memories of that trip, and I'll never forget it. Next story. When I was young, I would take a ferry over the Oslo Ford to my summer cabin. It was an old and tiny ferry called Bastøfergen, and I probably took it 6 times before it was replaced with a new electric ferry. Skip to about 10 years later, I was driving with my family along the Sunshine Coast out in nowhere in Canada, when a couple small ferry crossings on the way. One of those ferries seemed very similar, but I didn't get why. My mother jokingly pointed out it looked very similar to the Bastoy ferry, but we did not believe it actually was, maybe just a similar model or something. Then we found an info placard on the boat saying that it crossed the Atlantic 10 years ago from Norway, where it previously shuttled across the Oslo Fjord. It was the exact same ferry. Next story. Back in the mid-90s, I was a realtor. I was on the way to one of my listings to open it up for another realtor to show it to her client. It was during the Winter Olympics, and while I was driving, I started thinking about figure skating, which I always enjoyed watching. I started nostalgically remembering the Calgary Olympics in '88, I'm Canadian by the way, and how thrilling it was to watch Elizabeth Manley skate a brilliant routine which was one judge away from winning gold. I started fantasizing about how if I ever met her, I would tell her how proud Canada was of her, and how incredibly exciting her performance was. I got to the house, and the other realtor arrived and introduced me to her client. It was Elizabeth Manley. I was too gobsmacked to tell her anything I had been fantasizing about telling her, but I did get her autograph, which wasn't very professional of me, but I did not care. Next story. Okay, this is nuts. I was on my first day at a job in New York City, and had moved there the day before from the Midwest. My coworker asked if I had ever been to New York before, and I told her that a couple of years prior I had taken a semester off during college and lived there. I mentioned that I delivered lunches in a very neighborhood we were working in, and I just adored this one doorman who worked at a building just down the street. I said to her, "You'll never guess how I met him," and she responded without hesitation, "You handed him a white rose?" I was floored. I just met this woman minutes before and had never told her anything about me or a white rose because I was embarrassed. Then she said, "His name was Richie, right?" Still flabbergasted, I said, "Yes, and how did she know?" She said she worked in that office building a few years back and was friends with him. One night when she was leaving the building, he said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, but this girl came up to me today and handed me this white rose because she wanted to meet me." Isn't that cool? I couldn't believe it. Flash forward to a few months, and I was having drinks with that same coworker, and her mom and sisters came out to meet us. Her mom was first-gen Irish and asked me where I was from. I told her I was from Ohio. She said, "Oh, I don't think I know anyone from Ohio except Mary X, who is from our town in Iceland." I asked her to repeat the same name, thinking I didn't hear her correctly with her thick accent. She said, "Mary X." I responded, "Mary has been my next-door neighbor for 25 years and practically raised me." Both of these stories still blow me away. Ooh, how peculiar. This world might be way smaller than it seems. That's really sweet, though. But I live in Ohio, next to an Irish pub. That's gotta count for something, right? I want a cool returning plot line. Next story. I worked on the grounds crew at a golf course in my early 20s. I was mowing the practice green that was up by the old clubhouse. There was a paved path that went up to a fairly steep hill to get to the clubhouse from 18, and a small pond just off that path. My superintendent had parked near the plateau of the hill, only very small grade downhill, hopped out and ran into the clubhouse. During my last pass of the practice green, I noticed movement in his cart. The parking brake had apparently come undone, and the cart began rolling down the hill, aiming straight towards the pond. I turned off my mower and began sprinting towards the cart as it was picking up speed. Just barely managed to hop in the cart, mash the brakes, and get it stopped. He walks out of the clubhouse before I'd even got off the cart and asks what the F I'm doing in it. I explained the previous 30 seconds, and he doesn't believe a word of it. Probably still wouldn't. But you know what had happened? Probably the only time in my life I've ever felt like an action movie hero. And I never got a wink of credit for it. Next story. I've told my story here before about surviving COVID-19, but back in March or April 2020, I spent 38 days in the hospital. 16 of those days in the ICU on a ventilator. When I was in the ICU, on ventilator, there was a point my vital signs got so low and hard to track that the ICU doctors recommended to my workplace that they have grief counselors on site Monday morning because they didn't think I was going to make it through the weekend. Thankfully, somehow I did. If you want to read the last full write-up I did, including the long x-rays, you can find it somewhere else here on Reddit. And I still don't believe most of it myself. It's kind of hard to look back on an experience like that and think, wow, I mean, that happened? I actually remember the day I came home from the hospital, still on a full-size oxygen tank, and slumping down in a chair and started crying, asking a friend of mine that exact question. So, that all happened? It was just wild to go through something like that and come home roughly 40 days later to, okay, now what? Where do I even begin readjusting to normal life again? I always feel weird mentioning it or telling the story to people who haven't heard it before yet, because if you haven't directly been through something like that, how do you even explain it? It's sort of like being in an airplane crash or something along those lines, I bet. I also remember when I got off the ventilator and I was in the recovery ward. I got around to watching the TV news, and there was a news story talking about ventilators and saying that the average ventilator treatment is usually 1 week, and 80% of people don't make it. So for me to go 16 days, that's like twice as long, was pretty miraculous. I realized others had much longer ventilator treatments than I did and survived. Kudos to them as well. Next story. I was a young fella and picked up the phone in my home one night. Someone on the other end asked if it was John. I said yes. "Put your mother on the phone." Can I tell her who's calling?" "Come on, John, put Mary on the phone." After a bit of back and forth where I didn't know who it was, I asked what number they were calling. They gave me our phone number. For some reason, I asked what area code. They said 702, and I lived in Nova Scotia at the time, 902. So a woman in Nevada and a woman in Nova Scotia both shared a first name and a son's first name as well as 9 of the 10 digits of the North American phone number. Next story. I was at the British Embassy in LA for a party honoring the engagement of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They did a drawing for hundreds of guests, where one person and their guest would win a trip to London, flights, luxury hotel, the works. I turned to my husband and very dramatically said my name in an announcer voice, and then 2 seconds later they called my name. Next story. My cousin was adopted from Kenya when we were kids. He was about 8 when he was adopted and grew up in an orphanage before the adoption. We went out to eat at a restaurant with him and his parents one evening, and while we were at a table, a woman runs up to us and tells us she was one of the caretakers at the orphanage he grew up at. They recognized each other immediately. We were in California at the time, so it's crazy to think that this lady who knew him from Kenya ended up at the same restaurant as us at the same time, thousands of miles away, and it was so sweet to see their reunion. Next story. My aunt's favorite soda was Diet Coke. She always had them 24/7. Back in the mid-90s, when she passed, me and my mom were at the kitchen counter in Ireland where we had just received the call about her passing. Left our home, and we were on our way to my other aunt's house to meet up with all of our family who was gathering after hearing the news. We made a quick stop to a dollar store on the way there, where they had 2 off-brand soda machines outside. I can't remember the off-brand soda I was getting, but when it vended, a Diet Coke popped out. Keep in mind there was only 2 soda machines and they were both off-brand. Neither of them were name brand. We thought that was weird. So we go to our other aunt's house and gather with our cousins and uncles and aunts, and eventually, after a few hours, me and her headed back home. When we got home late that evening, we walked back into the same kitchen we had left from originally after receiving the call earlier in the afternoon. And sitting on the island counter was a cold can of Diet Coke. We never had Diet Cokes in our house. As a matter of fact, we never had Diet anything. The only soda we ever had in the house was Dr. Pep. It was a completely different can of Diet Coke as the one I had got from the vending machine, because that one was still in my mom's car, warm, and almost empty from me drinking it. The vending machine was kind of weird, but we had kind of explained it away by saying the vendor must have accidentally put Diet Cokes into it by accident, by maybe on purpose, etc. Who knows, right? But to get home and find a cold Diet Coke sitting on her counter, unopened, really took it over the top of us. I believe this was like 1995, if I'm not mistaken. Next story. I was training in Toronto with an expert in my field. Some other guy was there with overlapping training. He was the person trained just before me, then we switched off. He was from Alberta. We had met and made some small talk. Him, where are you from? Me, Winnipeg. Him, oh, my wife is from Winnipeg. Well, sort of, from a town near Winnipeg. Me, oh, where's that? Him, some place called Oak Bluff. Me, huh, my wife is from Oak Bluff. What year did your wife graduate high school? Turns out this guy and I, who lived 1,300 kilometers apart, had both worked in the same field, had both come to train in Toronto with the same national subspecialist expert, had both married women from a town of less than 2,000 people, and had grown up 5 houses apart from one another, and rode the school bus together. But beyond that, I had bought his wife's childhood home and was living in it, in the neighborhood my wife grew up in. Next story. I had my vehicle stolen in Las Vegas, and instead of finding it trashed somewhere, it was found 8 days later with some minor cosmetic damage. A new aftermarket radio and subwoofers, tinted windows, and a bunch of new and used tools in it. Over $2,000 worth of stuff. I don't live in Las Vegas, so when I was on my way back to pick it up, the detective told me over the phone, "There's a lot of stuff in there, and I don't know what is or isn't yours, so have a safe trip home after you pick it up." Honestly, the biggest surprise was that on my way to Las Vegas, the change engine oil light came on, and when I picked it up, it was off. I assumed he had just reset it, but when I drained it to change it, even the oil was brand new. Maybe not 1 in 1 million, but I've never heard a positive auto theft story before. Next story. I have not 1, but 2, and they both literally deal with the word mystery. 1. I was reading the non-fiction book Poverty by America, while Unsolved Mysteries was playing on the TV in the background. I ended up reading the word predestination in the book at the literal exact same time that it was also said on the TV by someone. 2. My favorite book growing up was called The World's Last Mysteries. Also, while growing up, my mom and I used to press wildflowers in books that we would find on our walks. The last flower that we pressed in The World's Last Mysteries was a wild red rose. We pressed it in the exact middle of the book so we could find it easily. When we moved across the country, we sold this book on accident at a garage sale, and I was devastated. Flash forward a decade later, and I'm at an antique shop in our new home state, and what do I come across? The World's Last Mysteries. I bought bought it immediately and brought it home. As I'm flipping through the pages, a super flat, super dry, red wild rose drops out of the middle of my book. Next story. This one's weird, but I was watching the TV and this compliance officer was being defensive about some of his recent actions. He talked for maybe 30 seconds of the segment, but that was enough for me to call in my partner from the other room and point him out to say, "He's a bad person. We're going to hear more about him." Not more than 6 months later, he was arrested. He was Dennis Rader. Next story. A while ago, my wife and I had a miscarriage with our first pregnancy, and it hit us really hard. As a way to deal with it, we went down to a local beach one night and wrote a goodbye message in the sand, and said a few words and just gazed out at the stars. All of a sudden, the surf rolled forward, and all the way up to our feet, it washed away the message out of the sand. The tide was not high, it was low, and we were standing easily 20 to 30 meters away from the edge where it was lapping, and the surf was not raging. I have no explanation. It was very, very weird. But we both did feel some sort of presence at that moment. I'll never forget that moment as long as I live. Next story. I worked at a pizza place off of Guadalupe and West Campus in Austin. One night on my bike ride home, I stopped at a 7-Eleven to use a payphone to ask my roommate if we had any beer in the fridge or should I get a 6-pack. He said everything was good. He had grabbed a 12-pack. I said cool, jumped back on my bike and kept on going. I get to my apartment, it was about a 6-mile ride, and went to take my fanny pack off so I could lock up my bike. As soon as I reached for it, I remembered that I took it off at the payphone because I needed a quarter for the call, but I left it at the payphone. I had my wallet, keys, tools, an ounce of weed, an old postal scale. Yes, I sold back then. Well, after going through all the motions of getting everything replaced, keys, DL, SS card, etc., I was opening the store about 6 months later, and when I was picking up the trash from the bushes, there was my fanny pack, with everything inside it except for the weed. Next story. First time shooting a gun, my friends got me to a shooting range. Since I was the only first-timer in the group, we were shooting discs. Instructor tells me how to aim. I hit my very first shot. He tells me to keep the shell as a memento. I proceed to hit 9 out of 10. He looks at me like I was lying about this being my first time. To be fair, his instruction was actually really good. Told my father about that. He mentioned that when he first took my mom shooting, he and his friends were trying to hit some bottles in the middle of a lake with a revolver, but having a hard time. My mom tries and hits them twice on the first and second shot. He said he never allowed her to pick up a gun ever again, for his own safety. Oh, Deadeye Nancy Wheeler! Or any other pop culture reference of a natural shot. Man, I wish I had that ability. Such a bad shot they won't even let me play laser tag. Next story. I was living with my parents in my hometown at age 20, waitressing, having quit college the year before. All my friends were in college. One day at work, I served a man and a woman. They were fun, and I said to him, "You look like the Russian comic Yakov Smirnoff." He laughed. Very happy couple. 2 years passed, and I decided to go back to school 2 hours away from home. I got a job waitressing, part-time, and one night I served a nice couple, and they made me laugh. And I said, "You look like the Russian comic Yakov Smirnoff." And he said, "Yes, I know, you told me that 2 years ago." Next story. I had just bought myself a 1970 Cadillac sedan DeVille and picked up a bunch of my friends to cruise around. We went out to eat at McDonald's, and when we came out, the car battery was dead. An older couple happened to be parked a few parking spots down near and offered to help me jumpstart the car. Great success! About a year and a half later, I was driving around late at night in a completely different car, with some friends driving through car dealership lots, the best time to check out the cars that dealers have on the lots because there's no salespeople there to pester you. I pull up and ask if they need help, and they said they had been waiting there for a couple of hours for a tow truck, and that they were too old to change a flat. I tell them, "Hey, I can change that flat for you if you have a spare," and they happily obliged. In the middle of me changing the flat tire, the husband asks, "By any chance did someone help you jumpstart an old Cadillac about a year and a half ago in the parking lot of a McDonald's?" It was the same people. Look at that! It's like you guys are both working as agents of karma for each other. Two guardian angels. Next story. Many moons ago, I started a new teaching job in a large district about 1,500 miles away from where I grew up. Our first day of the semester involved an elegant catered breakfast at a local university with a list of speakers that included a well-known senator. lecture. I didn't know a soul at the event apart from the 2 administrators who interviewed me. Naturally, I got lost on the way and dashed in at the last minute. Sat down in the first seat I spotted in our area, at the same table as my new boss, and eagerly tucked into the breakfast that had already been plated. As it turned out, I'd helped myself to a veteran teacher's seat and breakfast while he was using the restroom. I was absolutely mortified, of course. But he had such a good sense of humor about it that he insisted I stay put as he grabbed a chair from somewhere and squeezed in next to me. We got to chatting over the remains of his breakfast and quickly realized that he'd attended the same tiny Iowa high school as my parents. We became great friends, with him calling me Hawkeye and at every opportunity loudly asking if I'd seen his lunch. Next story. I went to a church service close to where I lived one Sunday and got chatting with the elderly couple sat next to me, who said they were tourists, having traveled from a city 3 hours away. Me, oh, my father, who had been dead for 10 years at that point, grew up in a village near there. Them, oh, what village? Me, at village name. Them, oh, we live there. Me, he used to live on Main Street near the church. That's where we live and have done since the 1950s. My grandma was called blank her name. Oh, wow, you must be my dad's name's son. Turns out 3 hours away from that village, the people sitting next to me were the next door neighbors of my grandparents and knew my father growing up. Next story. Nerdy tween me had been looking for How to Build a Telescope by Richard Berry. Went into the 10th bookstore and was about to leave when I saw a small corner of a book sticking out from on top, not the top shelf, of a rack in the anthropology section. Curious. I climbed and found an old covered in dust, jacketless, and coffee ring-stained copy of How to Build a Telescope by Richard Berry. Next story. About a year ago, I was in a very dark mindset. My partner and I were constantly fighting, and that day I truly felt like I'd had enough. I was exhausted, overwhelmed, and seriously questioning everything. I went outside because I couldn't breathe inside anymore. It was raining steadily. I stood under the overhang, half covered, looking up at the sky and crying. Out of nowhere, a hummingbird flew straight up to my face. It hovered right in front of me for a second, so close it startled me, then flew back into the rain and up toward the roof. Hummingbirds rarely fly in steady rain because it drains so much of their energy. They usually take shelter. That's part of why it felt so significant. It happened on the exact day I felt like I couldn't do this anymore. I don't know what you believe about science, but in that moment it felt like a message. A reminder, something small but powerful showing up in the middle of a storm and not being afraid of it. I was in a dark place, and that tiny creature jolted me back into the present. I still think about it. Next story. My 10-year-old golden retriever went to the pet ER because he had internal bleeding. They found he had a hematoma on his liver and nodules on his spleen. They told me it was a 99.99% chance of being hemangiosarcoma. No chance I said that right. A form of aggressive cancer of the blood vessels. At the same time, he had a hematoma on his ear, further pushing the chances of the cancer. We chose to do the surgery anyways. 2 weeks later, we get the call that all of the samples came back benign, a 1 in a million chance. He's now a happy 11-year-old boy living out his true golden years. Next story. I was hiking alone and got completely lost in the woods as the sun was setting. Just as I was starting to panic, a dog appeared out of nowhere, sat in front of me, and then slowly started walking. Something told me to follow it. It led me directly back to the trailhead and then disappeared. No collar, no owner in sight, and I've never been able to explain it, and nobody ever believed me when I tell the story. Next story. Years ago, before cell phones were a thing, I was heading out on a road trip with a friend when they unexpectedly needed to use a bathroom. So we stopped at a rest stop just outside of town. I walked around a bit to stretch my legs while I waited for them, and as I passed a payphone, it rang. There was nobody else around, so I answered. Names are changed, but the conversation went like this. Hello? Taslima? Eric? It was my older brother. We recognized each other's voices. What are you doing at Katie's house? Katie was his girlfriend. I'm not. I'm at the rest stop over by place. Turns out he had tried to call his girlfriend, mistyped one digit and dialed a random rest stop payphone at the exact moment his sister, who hadn't even intended to stop there, happened to be walking by. Next story. When I was 13 in 1993, or 1994. I went to see Megadeth open for Aerosmith with some friends. We had terrible seats way up in the back somewhere, and while we were standing in the lobby pre-show, a guy wearing official Megadeth crew gear walked up to our group and asked where our seats were. We showed him the tickets, and he said he wanted to give us better seats because they had a certain number of seats up front that are reserved for certain fans. We didn't believe him until we got down to the floor of the arena, and the usher pointed towards the stage and told us to go all the way down to the stage and show our tickets to the usher. We ended up on row BB, second row, with a bunch of the craziest metal fans I've ever seen, and after their last song they bowed and I yelled, "You rule, Dave!" And he pointed right at me and yelled, "Right on, little brother." I'm 46 now and I still love Megadeth. Banana. Hello, me. Meet the real me. Oh, Megadeth rocks. That's awesome, man. I mean, to get to go somewhere that you really care about, that you're really invested in, and they scooch you up to the front, that's the dream. I had that happen in a Browns game, which I am very passionate about, but you know they're not the greatest, so. Next story. I posted about this before, but people don't find it as interesting as I do. Years ago, I ran into an old friend who I had not seen in the last 10 years. We didn't just run into each other at a store or Starbucks neither. I had moved into a new apartment directly across from him and his family. But that's not the crazy part. It turned out we both ended up having girls. His daughter shares my birthday while my daughter shares his birthday. I mean, come on, how wild is that? Next story. I was sitting in a piazza in Paris, France, the night before departing home to the States after a 2-week vacay in the French countryside. Across the piazza, as I was people watching and scanning the nightlife, something caught my eye. The back of a t-shirt had the name of a brewery that was from my area of the U.S. Suspecting the person wearing it was American, and always looking forward to meeting a fellow American abroad, I approached the table to say hello. As the gentleman turned around to greet me, we both realized at the same time that we went to high school together and hadn't seen one another since graduation. Needless to say, I was hungover AF the next morning for the flight home. Next story. When I was young, around the age of 14, I suffered from asthma. One autumn Wednesday morning, I returned home from the hospital and slept until 9 in the evening. When I woke up, I went to sit on the balcony around 2 in the morning. The atmosphere filled with clouds hanging low near the ground. Incidentally, the next day it was expected that the president of a neighboring country would visit our country. While I was sitting and watching the clouds, I noticed something strange flying in the sky. It was very clear. It looked like a pyramid, but tilted to one side. Its lower side was pointing north, and the pointed tip was facing south. It was large and strangely illuminated. There was fire coming out of its pointed tip. It was flying at a low altitude and at a relatively slow speed. It flew for a few seconds, then suddenly increased its speed dramatically and rose above the level of the clouds, creating a clear hole in the cloud layer. I was shocked by what I had seen and ran quickly to tell my mother. When we went out to the balcony together, it was gone, but the hole it had caused in the clouds was still visible. I never knew what it was or what could have been, but I am certain that there must be a logical explanation for it. Next story. My best friend and I were practicing 8-ball in the bar he worked at. Winter breaks, buck a game, 2 if you run the table, and we'd settle up at the end of the night. I was in a good mood and feeling good, and he and I were just burning through game after game. After 5 or 6 hours, it's time for me to head home, and he's looking at me in awe and bemused amazement, says to me, "You have no idea what you did, do you?" I'm like, "Huh? What do you mean?" He tallies up the score and hands it to me. Well, it took me a few minutes after the fact. I won most of the games, which is what I thought he was referring to realize that during the course of the night, I ran the pool table 11 times in a row. Not just won 11 in a row, ran the table 11 in a row. The only time he got up to the table was to rack the balls for the next game. For anybody who's reading this and doesn't play the game, that's like completely insane. Truly, 1 in a million evening. I thought I was having just a really good night. Next story. I was told my low sperm count meant I would never be able to get anyone pregnant. Somehow we must have defied the odds because the person I was seeing conceived and gave birth to a beautiful miracle baby. 17 years later, the mother died suddenly from dilated cardiomyopathy. Rather than allow herself to be emotionally destroyed by the tragedy, my daughter went on to be a star pupil and was accepted into 3 Ivy League colleges. Even on days when I'm at my lowest, I consider myself blessed beyond my wildest dreams. Next story. When I was about 9, I saw a UFO in Colorado. I've always had trouble sleeping, especially when I'm in a place that I'm not used to. So when I was visiting my great-grandma in Colorado, Not being able to sleep was kinda expected, and for the first couple of nights I laid there awake trying to sleep. I distinctly remember looking at the alarm clock around 2:30 when I noticed what looked like a red laser pointer dot on some books on a bookshelf. I've always been one to notice stupid tiny details, so it piqued my interest. I started investigating and noticed it behaves like a laser pointer and tracked the origin to the window. As I'm doing this, I noticed 3 lights in the sky. One is doing a horizontal zigzag, while the other 2 remain motionless. Then suddenly the other 2 join in on the zigzag formation. I watched for what felt like an hour as they did this crazy dance, changing direction spontaneously, when without any indicator the lights all suddenly converged into one point of light and went straight up, disappearing into the night sky. I was so excited I woke up my aunt, who was sharing a room with me. She didn't understand. Next story. About 15 years ago, while walking across the closed areas of Capitol Hill, a cop in his personal car ran a red light and hit me while I was in the crosswalk. He rolled down his window, asked if I was okay, then drove off. I proceeded to go to work. The next morning when I woke up, I couldn't walk. Workman's comp, lawyers, and even the FOIA request for video from one of the 5 cameras in the intersection all went ignored. Eventually got told they have no video from that time frame of me being hit. That was it. Nothing happened, except for my lifetime of hip pain. Next story. I had a severe hemorrhagic stroke after being given TPA for a massive pulmonary embolism. That alone was rare. What happened next isn't supposed to be possible. The bleed destroyed my left temporal lobe. There was literally a dark black hole in the scans where it had been. I wasn't supposed to wake up, but I woke up. I had severe deficitis. I was paralyzed from the waist down, couldn't really understand anything, couldn't remember anything, unable to speak or read or write, and I was very sick with multiple infections. They weren't measuring my survival in days, they were going by the hour. But my mind slowly started to come back. I learned how to speak, how to read, how to write, even started to regain some mobility between episodes of illness. Broke my back in physical therapy, had to have emergency surgery to remove my gallbladder, which turned out to be the source of the sepsis. Even began to walk again for short distances. The craziest thing, though, is that the area of my brain that was damaged has filled most of the way back in with new brain cells. And my lungs, which were severely scarred and required 4 liters of supplemental O2 continuously, somehow healed to the point where I only have to wear 2 liters at night when I go to bed. It's a miracle. Next story. Was watching a Disney documentary on Disney Plus, The Imagineering Story, with my kids. It was episode 3, I think, near the Star Tours part. I told the kids I went the year it opened and how we lined up to run the ride as soon as the park opened and the rope dropped, whatever. They showed a clip of a random kid dancing or something, and I joked, "Hey, there I am." Literally, the next clip was of my wife back in 1986 or so at some Disneyland Kids Dance Club or something. Just randomly there after the moment I joked about being in the documentary. It was the most incredible coincidence I have ever been close to experiencing, and I love it so much I don't care if anyone else cares. Next story. Was at a summer camp for young adults on the East Coast. Hooked up with this girl and we hung out for a week. End of camp timing was so bad I left with family before being able to say anything or goodbye. This is way before cell phones or anything like that. I knew her name, and back then you used to call 411 to get someone's phone number if you had a name. I called 411 and asked for her phone number. Their operator paused and asked if I was XXX by name. I was shocked. It was her. She worked as the 411 operator. Had a great summer that year. Next story. At 1 a.m, a friend of mine and I were walking across a bridge in Portland, Oregon. The city was dead quiet. He was telling me about his high school girlfriend from 15 years prior in the little town he grew up in the state of Vermont. He hadn't seen her since high school. 2 people were walking towards us on the bridge. As we passed them, my friend recognized one of the girls. It was his high school girlfriend we were talking about. It blew my mind. Turns out she was visiting a friend in Portland. Next story. When I lived in Florida, my 3-year-old daughter was walking around with a paper in her hand. Finally, I asked if she can give it to me, and it was a White Christmas event ticket for Seattle. We dated December 2007. In perfect condition, I lived in Seattle, but gas 13 years old at the time still blows my mind. I took a picture of it, and I'm still confused how it ended up in her possession. Next story. The summer I graduated from college, I took the stereotypical European backpacking trip with my girlfriend and a mutual friend of ours. We got U-Rail passes and hopped from city to city, very loosely planned. We were in Piazza San Marco in Venice, leaving the Basilica and heading to lunch. I thought I recognized a girl off in the crowd. Seemed like a long shot, but I called out a name. She turns around, makes eye contact, and goes, "Oh my gosh." It was an exchange student friend from college on vacation with her boyfriend. No coordinated plans to meet up. We just happened to be in the same place at the same time a few thousand miles away from where we knew each other. Next story. I and my car got struck by lightning on a commute home one night. It got hot. I thought I was going to lose the car and have to figure out my way out, so I immediately hit the window buttons, rolled them down, and waited for the car to stall or catch fire or something. Nothing. The car cools down. The radio goes from static in a dead zone to clear again. Pulled in the driveway, parked the car, turn everything off, thinking, wow, it's lucky I got home. And I go inside thinking there's no way that car's going to start tomorrow. I don't even know how I got home. Wake up the next morning, breakfast, dress, head out to my car to go to work. I hit unlock, the car register unlocks with lights flashing and the noise. I think interesting. There's no way. I pull the handle and get in the car, slip the keys in and twist and the car starts fine. Radio, everything. No way, is all I could muster, and I drove myself to work the same way I had done the day prior. I know what happened because my car has a birthmark like scars on the root. I have a pic, but I don't know if this page takes pictures, but I love my car. It's my late Graham's. It's green, and I named her Shammy Grammy, Shamrock, to honor and remember my Grammy. It's like she never left. The car and my Grammy were definitely watching over me. Next story. Try this. I had a severe dissociative disorder from extreme trauma for my entire life without knowing, where I was not split into different personalities like DID, but several parts of my personality split, where the analytical part, bubbly part, etc. were sectioned in separate parts that switched and rotated kind of like a wheel of appropriate environments, situations, etc., performances, needs over and over like a spinning wheel that felt disconnected from each part. The memories kept separately in each, and I never understood what I said before, and without knowing, always felt ashamed that who I was 5 minutes ago was not authentic to the current part of who I was, and also didn't feel authentic to me. I understand who I was and was completely disjointed from my identity. It was so seamless, well, to others except for significant forgetfulness, repeating things, and some others. And then this thing happened where, when my body felt safe enough in my environment for the first time, it reintegrated itself, but it wasn't just like a gradual thing in a theoretical way. I mean that I violently felt like my brain did a somersault and fused them all into one. Plugs went to different connections, and the world was different in a moment that felt completely alien. My lungs breathed in deeper. I felt myself in my body so intensely the room looked HD for months after I had extreme fatigue. Random floods of lost memories coming through me in the most vivid forms I'd ever seen, and much more until symptoms passed, and I no longer knew how to communicate and engage with people with who I was as a whole person and what I'd like to do. A year on, I'm completely different as a person as to who I was before, and people have noticed that I grew to like who I am. I feel whole and actually present. Next story. I was a very grown-up and independent 14-year-old riding the bus alone. Unaccompanied minor from Arizona to Provo, Utah. An older, handsome man asked to join me at the dinner counter when the bus stopped in Kanab. Things were a lot different then, so I welcomed the company. He was clean-cut and appeared harmless, so the bus driver and fellow passengers didn't think twice when he settled in the seat next to me for the rest of the bus ride. We talked law, local politics, and I found him smart, intelligent, and charming. Things got strange when the bus got close to Provo. He kept telling me how he would take me home if Mom wasn't there, even though he said his final stop was Salt Lake City. He got off the bus with me in Provo, and his behavior changed when Mom was, indeed, right there. He kept putting his hands on my shoulders and telling her he could take me home if she was busy. Huh? It was 2 a.m. Mom, obviously, got very uncomfortable and hustled us out of there. Imagine my surprise when Mom and I saw that same man on the front page of the SLC Tribune a few weeks later. He'd gotten himself arrested trying to push a woman into this yellow Volkswagen Bug. Oh, his name was Ted Bundy. Mom is gone now, but the next decade proved her timeliness. That night was one of those dramatic forks in the road of this thing we call life. Next story. When I was around 13 or 14, I was trick-or-treating with some friends. We were stupid, bratty kids. One of my friends had a lighter he probably stole from his parents. I had just learned that Bianca, mouth freshener spray, was flammable. I said, man, if only we had some Banaka and we could make fireballs. About 5 minutes later, we are walking and I look down. Laying on the ground was an unopened Banaka spray. I mean, not the craziest story, but it blew my mind. Next story. When I was in high school, Goldfish had that "Find the fish with sunglasses" cracker and win $1 million contest. My friend and I were walking the track, eating from the box I had brought, when she held one up and said, this one's kind of burnt," and ate it. Not thinking about it, I threw the box away. It was the sunglasses one. 20-ish years later, I'm telling the story and someone casually goes, "You know the winning boxes were probably labeled on the inside, right?" No, I did not. Next story. Okay, here we go. So I was a young child with undiagnosed ADHD. My family had a tradition of camping every year. It was my stepdad, mom, 2 younger brothers, my step-uncle, his wife, his daughter, and his son. And we would wake up every morning at around 5 and take the boat out to go fishing. Again, I was a 7-year-old with ADHD. I love fishing, but holy cow, as a kid, when you're supposed to be quiet, it can be boring ASF. Well, the fish weren't biting. It was early, and I was tired. I laid down in the boat, forgetting my line was still in the water. Lo and behold, we finally get some action on my line. My stepfather was watching, his 2 poles, and my middle brothers. They're 3 years younger than me. Since he was little, well, there goes one of his father's poles, and I got reamed for it, and I didn't get to go fishing anymore that year. Fast forward 1 year, I'm older. I learned my lesson last year. I'm ready to go. I catch a snag, and I can't get it free. My stepfather takes the pole, and he himself was struggling to reel in the line. Finally, he makes some headway. As he's struggling to reel this in, I'm watching the water, and I see something breaching the surface. It's the rod of a fishing pole. I crap you not, it was the same freaking pole I had lost the year prior. No idea what the odds were of this happening, but I haven't had anything quite as surreal happen since. Next story. I was dating 2 girls at around the same time. One I met at a party on the west side of LA, and the other I met at a bar on the east side. I had nice first dates with both of them. Then I was going to pick up the west side girl for a second date. I brought some flour, etc. I knock on the door, and suddenly the east side girl opens the door. I was totally shocked. And my brain malfunctioned. Did I somehow go to the wrong place? Then the door opens up further, and there is the west side girl. They were good friends. The east side girl was just over hanging out and opened the door for her friend. I couldn't believe it. We all had a good laugh about it. What are the odds? Next story. My wife and I had made beer brats for dinner. While eating dinner, I got a call from my brother to see if we would like to hang out for the night. He had a relatively new girlfriend at the time, which is now his wife. Me and my wife were eager to get out of the house, so we packed away the leftovers and jumped in the car. While my wife was getting ready, I made a fully dressed bratwurst, mustard, chow-chow, onions. I took it to the car with me while I waited for her to come out. She had this old Lincoln that had armrests on the front seats that opened up into a small console. I stashed the bratwurst in the arm console as a joke to pull out to the ride of my brother's. On the ride, my wife kept talking about how good dinner was, and she finally said, "I wish I had another bratwurst. They were so delicious." I quietly reached into the armrest and pulled out a fully dressed brat wrapped in foil and handed it to her. The shock and confusion on her face was hilarious. Maybe not the 1 in 1 million story people are looking for, but the timing was pretty good, and we still talk about it 15 years later. Next story. I was ice skating in New York City in Central Park when I was a kid. Suddenly I collided with this guy. We locked arms and spun around in a circle a few times and then slowed down and let go. Neither of us fell, and we skated away from each other and never saw each other again. I can only skate in a straight line. No fancy backwards or circle stuff. My sister told that story to her husband about me, and he said, "I had the exact same experience as a kid. What year was that?" But it turns out he was completely joking. Oh well, we got a good laugh out of it. Next story. Was driving home late at night years ago and had my car just suddenly die, luckily near a gas station. As I'm looking down through my cell phone, there was a knock on my driver's window. I look up and there's 5 clowns surrounding my car. The one who knocked motioned with his hand for me to put my car in gear. I put it in neutral and the clowns pushed me to the gas station. When I opened the door to thank them, the clown who knocked honked his nose and they all ran off. I imagine they were probably right behind me when my car died, and they all wanted to give a guy a story that nobody will ever believe. Next story. I was once driving while sobbing because I needed to take my cat to an emergency vet. I wasn't speeding, much more than anyone else at least, but I crossed a state line and a cop without blinking lights was sitting on the side of the highway. I admittedly didn't switch lanes when passing the car, but I didn't know I was supposed to, even if their lights were off. He put his siren on and pulled me over. I was completely beside myself at my bad luck. When I rolled down the window, he asked why I didn't switch lanes, and I started blubbering my apologies and told him I was taking my cat in for surgery. And I swear, because no one ever believes me, The cop paused, looked at my cat meowing pitifully from the passenger seat, and said, "My cat died just last week. Just go." It still sounds like I made it up, but I was really grateful, and almost $4,000 later, my cat is still alive. A meanie butthead, but I love her. Next story. Back in 1999, I had a cocktail bird. His name was Lenny. He was so awesome and smart, and I told him to whistle the entire Andy Griffith song. And happy birthday to me, happy day sweet Lenny, happy day to me, and happy more, he whistled. And then the next one. Well, one day I was moving to another town about 20 minutes away. So, all the in and out, it was like 98 in Louisiana. It was hot. The guy I was seeing at the time had friends, a married couple. No kids, not too far from where I was moving from, so they asked if I wanted to bring Lenny to their house for the day, and they named that his wings weren't clipped, so he could fly. And they weren't supposed to have doors open or anything. Well, a couple hours later, I go to get Lenny, and they tell me he flew out when she went outside, and I was devastated and so upset. I looked and called for Lenny for hours and days and weeks. I was so heartbroken. Speed up to 2007. I'm married to a different guy, and we're at my mom's house, a good 35 minutes into another town from where he got lost. Mom's 90-year-old neighbor knocks and is scared because something is on her porch and she can't tell what it is. So my husband goes and comes back telling me it's a bird, but not a wild bird. So I grab a towel and some gloves, and it's a cockatiel, but so skinny and frail his feathers were plucked out. He wouldn't come to my husband, so when I walked over there, I've seen him. I knew it was Lenny, and I put my hand out, and he got on my hand, and he crawled up my arm. I get to my mom, and I'm holding him. Yup, he starts whistling Andy Griffith. It's the happy birthday, Lenny. I could not believe after 8 years he found me. And there's no denying that it was him. He had to have been through heck and years out of the elements. I knew it was him before he started whistling because I kissed his beak and he made a kiss sound like he always did. Lenny lived another 2 years after finding me, and I'm sure he lived his best last 2 years. He was amazing, and I still cry when I think about him, but I know he's high up whistling Andy Griffith over and over and over, driving him crazy in animal heaven. Rest in peace, my sweet Lenny boy. Next story. Went to this one tiny jazz camp on the Olympic Peninsula not far from where I grew up. Couldn't have been more than 80 people at once during a week in the summer. One of the fellow teenagers came from Montana. Fast forward 5 years later, and I run into her at a Powell's bookstore in Portland, which is the largest bookstore in the world, which she was visiting from Montana and I from north of Seattle. Hadn't seen her between that point and jazz camp and never since, but I have excellent face memory. I guess PNW is a small world? Next story. I used to be a spicy gymnast, a dancer/stripper. A man noticed my abdominal surgical scar and told me he has the exact same scar. It turns out we both had trauma surgery on the exact same day, November 5th, 2008. Mine from a car accident and his from a gunshot wound. But it gets even weirder. He was shot by his ex-girlfriend who had the same effing name as me. My name is not entirely unique, but I've only met 3 other people in my life who share it. This man was a complete stranger, who I happened to meet working at a nightclub. I definitely did not shoot him though, and I never saw him again. Next story. My first day on my first adult job, straight out of college, I was hit by an ambulance at a red light because its driver was texting. Car was totaled and I was broke. This was Detroit, 2014. The cops at the precinct essentially laughed me out of the room when I tried to file a report at the precinct. Car was 100% required for the job. I took my last $20 to Greektown, said a prayer, and hit spin on for the entire amount. I hit as I walked out with 25 grand in cash, went and bought a car and saved my job. Next story. I went to a Chicago White Sox game in 2008, I think, and they were playing the Angels. Then Torrey Hunter was playing in the outfield. Somebody in our section yelled out, "Hey Hunter, Torrey is a girl's name!" Now in 2017, our small construction company got hired to fly out to Seattle to finish this apartment building that was way behind schedule. One night I'm in the hotel bar, talking with the guy sitting at the bar. He was also from Illinois, and we were trauma bonding our White Sox fandom. He told me about how he would go to a lot of games when he lived in the city, and said, "I used to love to heckle the players. The best laugh I ever got was the time I told Torrey Hunter he had a girl's name." You showed him, man. You know, that's part of sports. The heckling sometimes is the best part. I was just at a Guardians game and we were yelling, "Chop his cheese! Chop his cheese!" I don't even know what it means, but I was all on board. Anyways, guys, that concludes our stories of 1 million things that have happened that nobody ever believes, okay? And I gotta tell you, we love a good high note, positive vibe story. A lot of them were just small world, you know? I met you at one point, and now I'm meeting you again. What are the chances? And it's nice, it's uplifting, I'm happy to be a part of it. And if you guys have any stories that you would like to drop down below, a big 1 in 1 million, perhaps even a 1 in 2 million, huh? Who's stopping you? Not me. Feel free to put those down below so we can continue the party and keep on reading together. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for hanging out with me. And who knows, maybe you and I met at some point. If you've been anywhere in the Northeast Ohio, I guess you've probably heard me talking. I never shut up. But I'll see you soon, guys. Oh, peace.